You've probably seen a Marc Chagall painting before. You know, the floating lovers, the dreamlike villages, that fiddler on the roof. But behind those really famous images, there's a deep, profound spiritual vision. Chagall truly believed the world had this hidden life, a kind of soul, and he basically spent his entire career trying to paint it. So in this explainer, we're going to explore that spiritual world and see what was really going on inside the mind of one of the 20th century's greatest artists.
This quote right here, this is the key. This is the key to everything. It's not just some pretty poetic line. It's the mystery we're going to unpack together. What exactly did he see bubbling up from under the surface? What was this hidden world he felt he had to make visible? You see, for Chagall, the world as we see it with our eyes, well, that was just the beginning. It was just the first draft. He was convinced that the visible world had a second life humming away inside it. And for him to only paint what our eyes see, that would be a lie. So his art became this incredible act of honesty, a way to be faithful to that deeper, hidden reality.
So this second life, what is it? Well, it's the world of the soul. It's the reason a simple kitchen table isn't just wood, but a place that holds the memory of every family prayer. It's why a single violin can carry the joy and the sorrow of an entire community. Chagall learned to paint the way the soul remembers, not in straight lines, but in symbols, not by the ticking of a clock, but by the rhythm of the heart.
Okay, so to really get this inner world, we've got to go back. We have to take a journey back to his village, Vitebsk. Now, for Chagall, this was not just a place on a map. No, it was the homeland of his soul. And the spiritual foundation of that place? It was built on 3 pillars: prayer, memory, and music.
All right, let's start with prayer. For Chagall, prayer wasn't some kind of religious decoration you just hang on a wall. It was essential. It was like breath, but it also had weight. It was the rope that tied his entire community to heaven, especially when the ground beneath their feet felt shaky and uncertain.
And this gets right to the heart of it. Prayer wasn't about some big public performance for Chagall. It was a private act. It was a way of looking at a simple piece of bread or at a child's face and seeing that it was not nothing. It was a way of finding the sacred in the most humble, ordinary parts of life.
Now for pillar number 2, memory. You know, for most of us, memory can feel like a photograph, a fixed, kind of dead thing. Not for Chagall. For him, memory was a living, breathing creature, a cosmos of its own that was always rearranging itself, pulling together the things that were most essential. So when you look at his painting, Eye in the Village, you're not looking at a report. You're watching a return to that inner world.
This is absolutely crucial to understanding him. In his memories of the village, a man and an animal could look each other in the eye as equals, sharing a common life. This deep sense of interconnection, of relation, that right there was the very definition of spirituality for Chagall. It's all about how things connect.
And that brings us to the third pillar of this homeland, music. You see that green violinist floating over the village rooftops? That's not just some whimsical, cool image. He actually represents survival. In Chagall's world, music wasn't entertainment. No way. It was the pulse that kept the community alive. It was the force that could lift up whatever was heavy. The violinist is a spiritual figure for a very specific reason. Because a melody can do something words sometimes can't. It can hold the crazy contradictions of life, all the grief and all the joy, at the exact same time. It expresses the inexpressible. And for Chagall, that ability was profoundly spiritual.
Okay, so we've explored the soul's homeland. It's beautiful. But what happens when that homeland is under siege? Chagall lived through some of the absolute darkest moments of the 20th century. And you know what? His art never looked away. This is where his spirituality gets put to the test, and where suffering itself becomes a kind of revelation.
And this brings us to one of his most powerful and, honestly, most controversial works, White Crucifixion. In the face of rising anti-Semitism and horrific violence, Chagall painted this to make the truth of suffering absolutely unavoidable. He wanted to show the world what happens when humanity forgets the human.
His strategy here was just radical. By showing Jesus as a Jewish martyr surrounded by the very real contemporary suffering of Jewish people, he used a symbol the Christian world already understood to force it into a room it refused to enter. He was using a universal icon of suffering to demand empathy for a very particular suffering. And Chagall's work really asks the same thing of us, doesn't it? His art isn't just something to be admired on a wall. It's a moral confrontation. It challenges us to stop and think. Where do I avert my eyes?
Where in my life do I turn away, and where do I really need to look longer, even if it's hard?
So, after confronting all of that darkness, Chagall offers his most defiant spiritual statement. He argues that human love, passionate, tender, real human love, isn't just an emotion. He believed it was a sacred, world-altering force. For Chagall, cruelty is basically a lie. It's a lie that pretends it's the only reality out there. And love? Love is the truth that rises up and contradicts that lie. Now, this isn't some naive or sentimental idea. For him, it was a form of spiritual resistance. It was a weapon against despair. Let's be really clear about this. Chagall didn't paint his famous floating lovers because the world was all safe and rosy. He painted them because the world was unsafe. It was his way of refusing to let brutality and cynicism have the final word. It was an act of profound, beautiful defiance. Now, the culmination of all of his spiritual art can really be found in his famous stained glass windows for Jerusalem. Because here, Chagall moves beyond just depicting light on a canvas. Here, he begins to paint with light itself. Think about the progression here, the leap he's making. He understood that paint on a canvas can only imitate light, right? It's a copy. But stained glass, it becomes light. And it doesn't just hang on a wall, it enters the room. It changes the very air you breathe, and, most importantly, it includes you in its glow.
And this explains the whole spiritual function of the windows. A painting, by its nature, creates a bit of distance. But these windows, they break that barrier right down. They touch you. They literally make your face part of the art. For Chagall, the opposite of the sacred was exclusion. So these windows are his ultimate statement of inclusion.
So, when it's all said and done, what is Chagall's final legacy? Well, it isn't a set of answers or some doctrine you have to follow. It's much simpler and much more profound. It's an invitation. It's an invitation to see the world differently, to start looking for that second life in everything around us. In a way, he leaves us with a kind of spiritual toolkit. He's asking us to look at our own lives and find our own connections between the visible and the invisible, to ask ourselves, where is my ladder to something higher? What's the music that lifts me up when I'm down? And who or what do I treat as sacred? And that, right there, is his enduring gift. He doesn't tell us what to see, he teaches us how to see. He invites us to look at the most ordinary things in our lives, a table, a window, a face we love, and to just ask this simple, quiet question. And if we can start to do that, well, then the paintings have done their work. They've reopened the world.